Hi, folks. Thanks for joining me again. This session is focused around looking at problems, but from a slightly different perspective. The example I'm going to be using here is focused around policing, but that's not to say that the same logic couldn't be applied to other industries. So, without further ado, we're going to run this as a whiteboard session. So follow along, and if there are any questions, by all means, pop them in the comments below. So one of the things that I find a lot in my day to day is a customer. Let's put those in a little box over here. A customer will usually get in contact with myself. So we'll go with a Microsoft partner, and we'll ultimately look for a solution to one of their problems. So one of those could be, I don't know, they may be looking at reporting as an example, and the output of that might be something like Power BI. But the other aspect is if you look at sort of processes, they may talk about inefficiencies in a process. One of the things we might look at there is something like Power Apps. Now, there's more to it than a simple straight line of how we get from point A to point B. But what I want to kind of highlight here is that usually the customer looks at a problem which is linked to themselves. Now that's quite a large generalization, but again that's based on what I tend to hear from my customers. And what doesn't really happen, especially we can look at it from a policing perspective, is right. Well, these problems, how much of a problem are they actually, and are they instead looking at in let's say the efficiency scenario, they're saying, well, how do we make our processes more efficient to get a certain output, as opposed to identifying what the underlying problem is. And oftentimes what you find is that a customer might come through and say, right, well, we have an inefficiency. We've identified that we want Power Apps as a solution. And then ultimately they're going out to a partner to look at either some pre-canned off-the-shelf stuff, maybe something custom, or looking for some skills. Okay. Now, the lens I want to put over this is, well, actually, why don't we start looking at these problems from a slightly different perspective? So let's take policing, and the example I'm going to use here is speeding fines. Okay. So hopefully things that people are aware of. Essentially, the premise around this is. Hoping I'm not teaching people how to suck eggs, but the point is that if you go above a speed limit, you get caught by camera. Depending on how much you go over that speed limit, there will be different outcomes. Whether that could be, you're banned from driving, all the way through to, you may get a smaller fine, and then sort of a driving awareness course. And the premise with all of this is thinking about how you may firstly identify what a problem could be, but also look at ways of getting around it. So one example could be, and we'll look at this from two sides. We'll look at this from a perspective of a customer. I suppose a better way of putting this would be, the business, and we can look at it from a perspective of our customer, as in someone who we're engaging with. So that could be a member of the public, a citizen, a partner, organisations, and so on. And with all of this, we can start thinking about how we're going to look at defining a problem. So in the scenario of our speeding fine, we could look at it from a couple of different perspectives. So one could be that payments aren't being made. We could look at it in a sense of they're reliant on partner organisations, specifically around maybe licenses, so checking licenses and recording any points against those licenses. you can think about the camera teams, and you can start looking at a few of these different points and understanding actually how do these things come together. So a problem for the business could be that, right, well, we're receiving payments, but we're actually not getting information around the licenses because it might be a third party. And you might go, well, actually, we have these camera teams out and about capturing information, but they need to provide information within 14 days. Otherwise, the customer, the member of the public, can't be charged. And if you look at this problem just on its own, you might go, right, well, it looks as though we've got a system where we have payments in one place, and that might be in maybe sort of one portal somewhere, and then we've got a partner system somewhere else. So we want to box that off, and then we have the camera teams, which are out and about capturing information. And you may be thinking about, right, well, how do we bring data together? And you could say, right, well, when it comes to the partner teams, you might use something like you could use a Power App as an example to send information through to that payment mechanism of some sort, to go through, generate letters, make members of the public aware of what's going on. When it comes to the partner systems, maybe you could look at doing some sort of integration, maybe doing it via an API, or maybe looking at how we could potentially group some of these systems together. Maybe you could even get to a point of actually sending out letters in the post. You could look at SMS messages. You could look at sending emails out to make sure that people are actually submitting the details. There's a number of different ways in which you could potentially handle some problems. And in this scenario, we could look at over here, the timeliness of information. That might be a problem we want to resolve. It could be that there were missing payments, so we may want to send some alerts out for that. Or it could be that there's miscommunication or a lack of communication with partner organisations. And when you look at it from that problem, you can go, right, well, let's go away and let's do a big project on how we integrate all these different bits and pieces together using APIs, and let's look at how the camera teams actually go through and submit information, and look at some separate processes around that. And let's also consistently chase our customers so we know that we're going to get the information that we need. And ultimately, following this process, you end up in a scenario where, right, well, you get the customer information. So the customer is sending data through. It's going into their payment portal or payment portals. So again, you may have a main portal, and then you've got another sort of partner portal. Information might go into there. There may be a separate camera team who sends information. The customer can send all this information to all these different places, and then you can try and join things up later on down the line. And you'd hope that the answers to that is, well, things are done a little bit more timely. That's good news there. That everyone's communicating. There we go. And then any missing data, we can just get the customer to submit more information, sort of here and here, to achieve those goals and ultimately get those success metrics. So when you look at the problem from a purely business perspective, there you go. You've got a few solutions there. You've got a few different ways in which you can, answer that problem. Now, when you actually look at it from a customer perspective, one thing to highlight is this bit here, where we're asking for loads of information from those customers. And then you start thinking about, right, well, what are these problems that we've identified? We've identified timeliness, communication, and maybe there's missing data. And could it potentially be that, well, actually the reason that the timeliness is a bit naff is because the customer's having to submit 3 different things in 3 different places? So one example being that in this scenario, if you look at the process that some police forces use, the customer creates or does the offence. We'll put that down there. They then get a letter, and in the letter it tells them to do 2 things. One of them is go to a a portal, a payment portal. And the other thing is it says go through and submit your license. Okay. The payment portal is online, and the submit license is done by post. And adding on to that, the online portal asks you for your phone number. I'm just going to put SMS in here for now, but it could be phone number and email. And on the postal elements, it does the same. And then once you go through and pay it, sometimes you'll get a notification that you've paid it, other times you won't. And on the postal side, sometimes you send the post off, and then there's another team that then sends out another letter to chase, of which you then submit back into post, and sometimes you can end up in this constant loop, ultimately being broken via maybe a court summons because you've been in breach of your agreement. So you can see from a customer's perspective, look at all those hoops that they have to jump through. And then when you start overlaying the timeliness, right, well, let's take timeliness again. Oh, there we go. Take timeliness again. Well, maybe it's because that they're having to not only answer some chasing letters, but they have to submit their details into one system and then into another system. Then they're being chased by SMS, email, post, and then potentially SMS and email again. So maybe that's causing the problem. When you look at the communication side of things, we talk about this element of when you're submitting information in a business setting, you want to standardize your processes so that when people come in and start filling in data in forms, in this scenario, it might be a simple, we want to capture their name, maybe address, and so on. You end up in a situation where you want to capture it once and then store that and remember it. Whereas actually in this scenario, they're having to store it in one system, two systems, potentially three systems. So they're having to capture data 3 different times, and adding to that, there's no communication between the systems. So there's an element of, right, well, we're causing the problem initially because we're trying to capture data 3 different times, but then we're compounding that problem by, again, not having proper system integration. And then the final point is, well, missing data, which we've kind of just covered there, which is actually, a customer may come through and submit their name, maybe SMS, email, whatever that might be, but they may, again, put in incorrect information, or they may submit information to one system, i.e. their payment portal, and think that, well, because I've done that, I now don't need to do the submit the license bit via post, because again, it's more hoops to jump through. So, solution in this scenario, take our customer. What if they just went to one portal, went to one payment portal, and from that portal, they could do their payment. Adding on to that, that might be stage 1 of the form they fill in. Stage 2 of the form could be license details. And stage 3 could be just a notification back to the customer to let them know that everything's been submitted and they're good to go. And off the back of that, so that's a nice easy process that immediately ticks off timeliness. It immediately ticks off this, which is information submitted. We can get that going through the system. We don't need to enter data into 5 different places. When it comes to communication, well, it's all within one single location. And off the back of that, we can do other things. So when we look at missing information between partner systems, we can do an integration if needs be. I'll just call it API, where we can take that data and pass it out to an agency if needs be to carry out the other checks and balances. And that's one option. Notifications, or we can send those out. We might use something like Power Automate or some other technology there. But essentially, you end up in a situation where, just to recap, timeliness, you've resolved that. It's a single portal that people can go into. communication, you're able to then capture a single version, you're making sure the data is correct, and then when it comes to sharing that data with third parties, you can just do that via API and have a single method of how people can get into it. Now, the other side of this is, well, what if people don't have access to a mobile device, a laptop, they can't access the portal? There should still be options to submit via post. And I think the reality is that when you actually look at the process, if we move things out a little bit further, you will end up with your customer. They've committed their offence. They will receive a letter, and I think there's no real way of getting around that at the moment. But from that letter, you can then say, right, well, you can go to a portal if you wish. You can always have the postal option, but the real point is that regardless of which one they go to, it should be a single data submission. And there should be some sort of feedback to let them know that things have been actioned. Adding to that, your portal is obviously web-based. We talked about later on or earlier on where we talked about, what if things are missed with the postal elements, it's lost in transit, and there's other consequences, potentially points around here as well, which is just making sure there's, more information provided at this point, such as, well, maybe use recorded delivery. So there we go. I mean, when we zoom out, there's a lot of stuff there, but the point is that when we're looking at problems, first things first, don't go in and define the technology immediately. It's just not going to work. You want to be going in and looking at like what outcome are you looking for, and ultimately getting advice on how to sort that out, and then technology should come last. So for any customers out there which you're looking to work with a partner effectively, really look at defining that outcome and then working with that partner to quantify it, actually get to understand what the value is of that. And then when you start looking at phrasing that problem, don't just look at it from how do we make the business work better. That's probably the wrong way of putting it, but rather than looking at it purely from a business perspective, actually think about the people which are going to go through that process and actually how they may be looking at that problem. So I hope you enjoyed this session. Again, another whiteboarding one. It's a bit monochrome, so I'll have to add some colour in next time. But hopefully that gives you an idea as to how we can look at different ways of looking at problems and coming up with some solutions.